we started to think about the Strange Weather exhibition, I think that one of the works that Jennifer and I really began thinking about, Leo, was yours, and this amazing 215B, this amazing sculptural piece that I think captures a kind of energy that is very, very responsive to the time, in a way that seems like this explosion, this movement, this kind of emphasis on action and movement, and this kind of idea that things seem to be falling apart, but in your work, it's frozen, right? So, and also we were really interested in the idea that you talked about your process as acting as weather. And in many ways, this is the reason why we started thinking about the title Strange Weather and all the works in the exhibition through that kind of lens. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about this work and your idea of your kind of weathering process?
Well, I mean, say weathering process, it's like where you don't actually separate yourself from the natural forces. We are actually a part of that, you know, the natural forces. We are the nature of nature. We're not separate from it. So as we sort of move forward and we find ourselves sort of continually sort of like enveloped by seemingly chaos, we should understand that actually we are chaos. And we should actually find our, you know, like a common ground with this, and you know, understand that it's all good, it's natural, you know.
So one of the amazing things about the work is its three-dimensionality, the way it pushes into the room and invites us to sort of feel enveloped by it. Can you say a little bit more about the process of constructing it and how you were to achieve that effect for us visually?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the fact that I compose, you know, mainly in spaces, I have to sort of know the space, you know, where, you know, these compositions are going to be realized, and then allow the piece to sort of like become the space. It's still the same philosophy, the same idea of freedom, of weather being a natural force. You have to now come into a space and now become that space, you know, as though you are now also becoming the weather. So it's not difficult. It's very simplistic, a realization of how to compose. So if you're looking for, I guess, other metaphors, music is one. Musical notes, how we realize, you know, like a scale, and how we build on scale in order to sort of realize a volume of sound. It's the very same idea. So sounds complicated, but actually for me, as a sort of like using it as a tool to realize this, it makes absolute perfect sense. So you can become the weather, you can feel the weather, you can sound like the weather, you are the weather.
I love your musical composition reference, and I think about the different kind of refrains that operate in the work, and how on either ends of the piece there are sort of these repeated elements, and within the elements there's certain kind of repeated forms, whether they're sort of little square rectangles on wood or certain planetary looking scenes. Can you say a little bit more about the idea of the spread of the work and how you want your viewer ideally to walk through it or attend to it? Like a musical score or something like that.
You said something interesting. You said a cosmic realization. You know, I also think on that too, on the cosmic scale. So if you were to sort of like realize this as your planetoids, and then like on that canvas, that tapestry, you know, you're building your stars and your other planets. It's all of these things actually do make cosmic sense, you know, down to the most minute forms, you know, up into the more larger realizations of what's possible. So, you know, it only looks complicated, but if you know that I was not here to put this up, you know, so they were able, your people, when they were putting it up, were able to sort of like realize, like, you know, how to sort of manifest this very same thing. You know, once this sort of got into the rhythm of it, it was done. I mean, I came in and it's like, I hadn't put it up, but I realized it as they got it, you know, they understood the philosophy of what it meant to become the weather, you know, and what things should look like when they're sort of like windswept, you know. You have to become the weather in order to sort of understand that.
Yeah. Can we say, oh, go ahead, Rachel.
I have a question too, this idea of becoming the weather, because I think that the backdrop in which we're looking at this work and in which we were thinking about the exhibition before we even installed it, you know, is very present, right, and is kind of these weather systems, whether we're talking about COVID or we're talking about
climate change.
We're in California, you know, where we're facing drought conditions, wildfires. And, you know, one of the things that I was really struck with in this work is that it seemed to capture so much of the feeling of being in this moment, the experience of our bodies, trying to figure out these connections. And yet, it also refuses to represent it in a way. And your use of the title 215B, right, is one of the ways you do this. So can you want to talk a little bit about that tension?
The idea that the viewer is complicit and realize or finishing the work, you should be able to stand in front of it and find yourself. So, you know, if I were, you know, like sort of like more sort of didactic about like, okay, you know, more regimented about like how you should how this work should be realized, with certainty, I'm sure that there would have been a visual freedom would have been lost, you know. So what you're seeing, this sort of chaos, this sort of movement, actually is about a level of understanding of letting go, you know, allowing things to be, you know. The world is trying to correct itself in spite of us, you know. So we are actually, once we start getting in line with how that planet wants to sort of correct itself, we're all going to be okay. But if we continue to sort of do what we're doing, you know, no, it's going to sort of like move on, and correct itself without us, you know. But we have to sort of understand that we are actually a part of something much larger than ourselves. You know, we are not in control of anything.
I'm really struck by the use of the word freedom in this, and that there's something about abstraction and the allowing the viewer and the experience of the work to not, you know, be didactic, to not do that work as a kind of search for freedom and the pursuit of freedom. That's a really powerful way to talk about it.
Well, yeah, it gives me the opportunity to learn also. I mean, the very idea that actually I could take the position of actually continually teaching you when you know, I should also be learning, you know, like there's nothing more sort of like, there should be a healthy back and forth between individuals. So even as an artist who's sort of like supposedly giving you or handing over this sort of idea of, you know, how things should be or how I believe things should be, it's like, what if, you know, I actually open an ear to sort of hear what's on the other side of that you actually have something also to offer, standing in front of this mirror, right? You know, you also can see something that maybe I hadn't even thought of, you know. I continue to learn.
It's beautiful and generous. Mm.
A lot of your work references architecture and structure. Would you like to talk a little bit about how this piece fits into your other works? How do you see this in conversation with other works that you've done? You said it's a new sort of move into color, and you're doing more color work than you did before. Mm-hmm. What does 215B to you, like in the bigger sweep of ideas having to do with space, architecture, color?
You know, it's there's possibilities. I mean, like, and you know, it continues to sort of reveal itself. That is actually the beauty of the journey, is that, you know, it is always the potential to sort of like turn over another stone and find something else. And I think that like taking the sort of opportunity to sort of explore in China and work with the artisans there, not knowing what I was going to be coming away with, but just knowing that, okay, you know, maybe there's going to be some kind of trade-off, you know, just the fact that my body is here, and they're generous enough to sort of allow me into a craft that it's like thousands of years old, you know, and like and they're making these giant vases, and they have a tradition for making these things. How do I implant myself into that, and what am I going to come away with? It's an absolute total mystery. But in the end, you know, it's like, I didn't see that. I didn't see it.
Beautiful blues, like the glazes. You see that like going on in there.
Absolutely, and I think that it continues. And of course, the interesting thing about this is that there was a fair trade-off, because like China's kind of like the Wild West. So it's like they're grabbing some of the things that I'm doing. I was smashing things, and they thought it was garbage in the beginning. They were throwing it out, and then once they realized that, oh no, this actually is, you know, valuable. Now, if you were to go to Shanghai, go to some of the stores, you'll see smashed porcelain pieces, you know, like this is what they do. I'm not getting any credit for those things, but the fact is I came up with something and they got something too. Yeah, so I think that trade-off, it was a fair trade-off. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if you want to talk a little bit, and you can say no too, but if you want to talk a little bit about thinking about your works in relationship to the other images, because I know that when Jennifer and I started thinking about this exhibition, you know, your work was always in it and was actually always on this wall, right? But many other of the things kind of rotated around, and what we found was that as we put them in relationship to each other, it was almost like, it was like different lighting, you know? It was like the whole thing gets illuminated in different ways. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, there's a dialogue, obviously. Once you start placing these things, but also just as strong with one another, there's a dialogue that happens. And, you know, for you guys to sort of pick up on it, you know, without actually placing the things physically together is one thing. But once they're in the room together, it's all bets are off. So it's the beauty of actually, you know, what you guys do, you know, composing, bringing all elements together, and then having us try to make sense of it. Even if you guys put in words what you thought, I'm almost sure something else was added, you know, that you did not like have, you know, right. Like any inkling of. It's like there they are, the bodies are here now.
Until they come. Exactly.
And now they're all in conversation with one another. And I'll tell you guys did a great job. It was a beautiful conversation, you know. Yeah, I'm just honored. I mean, that elements are Julie on the other end. I mean, Kihende. I mean, this is Jordan composing also, you know, a collection, you know. Yes. So I think that's just the beauty of, you know, like of all this. It's like I only just get to live through this, but the fact is there are all these other elements out there, puzzles to a, you know, larger. You know, like a thing that has to come together, you know, that does come together. And when it does come together, it's powerful.